saw a show once on television where a stranger knew all about all the folks in the town.
I'd best break out them tear gas bombs.
What for?
Well, what if there should be a jailbreak?
The most famous sheriff in television history died on a Tuesday morning in July of 2012. By around 11:30 that same morning, he was already in the ground. No funeral, no cameras. America found out he was gone after he was already buried. And that's only the beginning. The barber who made the whole town laugh spent his final 3 seasons secretly paralyzed. A hidden stand held him upright.
Just like my sinus trouble. The other night I woke up.
It starts at my shoulder.
Must have been about 3:30.
And then works down to my elbow.
The audience never saw it. The woman who played America's sweetest aunt waited until she was dying to make one phone call. An apology. 20 years late. And the deputy everybody loved? His best friend leaned over his hospital bed and begged him to breathe. This is what really happened to the people of Mayberry. Stay with me.
Did he deliver me, Paul?
Yeah, gave you your first slap.
What'd I do wrong?
Nothing, that's what a doctor does on a baby, breathe.
Andy Griffith was born on June 1, 1926, in Mount Airy, North Carolina. His family was so poor that as a baby he lived with relatives until his parents could afford a home. He was a shy kid from the wrong side of the tracks. And the thing that saved him wasn't the law. It was a minister at the local Moravian church who taught him to sing and play the trombone. That's where Sheriff Taylor's guitar really comes from. In 1953, a comic monologue called What It Was Football made him a national name. Then came Broadway, and a movie called No Time for Sergeants. That's where he met a skinny, nervous actor named Don Knotts.
Remy? Go!
Remember that. In 1957, he played a monster.
Good night, you stupid idiot. Good night, you miserable slob.
A face in the crowd cast him as a smiling demagogue who manipulates all of America. Critics now call it a masterpiece. The friendliest man on television could play terrifying. He just chose not to. The show launched in February of 1960 through an episode of The Danny Thomas Show. Sheriff Andy Taylor arrests Danny for running a stop sign. But here's what most fans never knew. Andy's manager negotiated him majority ownership of the series. Andy Griffith didn't just star in Mayberry. He owned it, and within the first handful of episodes, he made the smartest decision in sitcom history. He realized Don Knotts was funnier than he was. So the star demoted himself to straight man and handed his own laughs away.
And run you through.
Try and run me through. I'll watch what I do. Ready?
Okay.
Hold it!
He worked on every single script and never took a writing credit. Don Knotts won 5 Emmys on that show. Andy Griffith was never even nominated. Not once. He ended the show himself in 1968, walking away while it was the #1 program in America. Then came a decade of failure. Headmaster, The New Andy Griffith Show. Salvage 1. Nothing worked. In 1983, Guillain-Barré syndrome paralyzed him from the knees down. He spent 7 months learning to walk again. 3 years later, he came back as Matlock and ran for 9 more seasons. But the private cost kept mounting. His biographer says that behind the marriages, he carried on a years-long affair with his on-screen sweetheart. He reportedly proposed to her more than once. And in 1996, he lost his son Sam after a long battle with alcoholism. He almost never spoke of it. Andy Griffith died of a heart attack on July 3, 2012, at his home on Roanoke Island. He was 86. Just as his family had planned for years, he was buried on his own land within 5 hours. Before most of the world even knew he was gone, the man who built television's friendliest town slipped out its back door without saying goodbye.
You can take to relieve that pleasure. You're not sick, you're just.
Jesse Donald Knotts was born on July 21, 1924, in Morgantown, West Virginia. He was the youngest of 4 boys, raised in the boarding house his mother ran. According to his biographer, his father suffered from severe mental illness and alcoholism. He died when Don was a boy. The most nervous man on television came by that nervousness honestly. He hated the name Jesse his whole life. Hold on to that, because it comes back at the very end. He performed as a teenage ventriloquist and entertained troops in the Pacific during World War II. Then he earned a degree from West Virginia University. His twitchy, nervous man routine on The Steve Allen Show made him a comedy name. Then one night in 1960, out of work, he turned on The Danny Thomas Show. There was his old No Time for Sergeants co-star, playing a small-town sheriff. And Don noticed the sheriff had no deputy. So Don Knotts picked up the phone and hired himself. There was no audition. The producer just kept him waiting 3 weeks to say yes. What America didn't know was the deal. According to the show's 1981 chronicler, Barney Fife started at $1,250 an episode. That's roughly $35,000 a year, with zero ownership. Meanwhile, the man he shared every scene with owned the majority of the show. Don's own manager later admitted he'd worked out a terrible deal. It left Don with almost no real money after 5 years. 5 seasons, 5 Emmys, a salary. And then he left over a misunderstanding. Andy had always insisted he'd never do the show more than 5 years. So during season 5, Don started protecting himself and signed a 5-picture deal with Universal. Then Andy changed his mind and decided to keep going. But by then it was too late. Don said for the rest of his life that if he'd known, of course he would have stayed. There was no feud. There was never a feud. He came back to guest star and won 2 more Emmys doing it. The films, The Ghost and Mr. Chicken, The Reluctant Astronaut, all turned a profit. Then came a second life as Mr. Furley on Three's Company. At 80, he developed lung cancer and told almost no one. He wanted to keep working. On the night of February 24, 2006, Andy Griffith rushed to his hospital bed in Los Angeles. Don couldn't respond. Andy told him he loved him. Then he used the childhood name Don had always hated, the name only Andy was allowed to use. He begged him, "Breathe. Keep breathing, Jess." His daughter says Don was cracking jokes on his deathbed so hard she had to leave the room to laugh. He died that night at 81. The funniest deputy in America went out doing the only thing he'd ever wanted to do, making his family laugh.
We got to nip it! Nip it in the bud! Nip it! Let's hear it! Nip it!
Ron Howard was born on March 1, 1954, in Duncan, Oklahoma, into a family of working actors. He was just 6 years old when he got the part. His father, Rance, stood just off camera for 8 straight seasons. Coach, guardian, and quiet protector. America literally watched this kid grow up across more than 200 episodes. From a 6-year-old with a fishing pole to a teenager. And here's the part that makes him almost unique in Hollywood history. Nothing went wrong. No breakdown. No scandal. No lost years. Ron Howard has said for decades that watching Andy Griffith shape scripts at that table was his first film school. He went from Opie to Richie Cunningham on Happy Days, then walked away from acting to direct.
You're an absolute genius.
Splash. Cocoon. Apollo 13. Then in 2002, A Beautiful Mind won him 2 Academy Awards in one night. Best Director and Best Picture. The little boy from the opening credits became one of the most powerful filmmakers alive. Today in 2026, Ron Howard is 72 years old and still directing. Of everyone who ever lived in Mayberry, the 6-year-old is the one who conquered Hollywood, and the only one who came out without a single scar.
You mean you're gonna leave all that food on your plate, Paul?
Well,
What about what you told me this morning?
what was that?
You know, about all the people in the world not having enough to eat, and how it's almost a crime for us not to finish everything on our plates.
Jim Nabors was born on June 12, 1930, in Sylacauga, Alabama. He was a police officer's son with asthma so severe he couldn't play sports. So he learned to do voices instead. He got a business degree, worked as a typist at the United Nations, and cut film for a TV station. At night, he performed at a Santa Monica club called The Horn. One evening in 1962, Andy Griffith was in the audience. The role of Gomer Pyle was supposed to be a one-shot gas station attendant. It became a phenomenon. Then in February of 1964, in an episode called The Songfesters, America found out the joke. Behind that high-pitched drawl was a full operatic baritone. The voice was real. He recorded more than 30 albums. He became Carol Burnett's good luck charm on every season premiere of her show. And he sang Back Home Again in Indiana at the Indianapolis 500 for over 4 decades. His spin-off, Gomer Pyle USMC, never left the top 10. Then he quit it while it was the #2 show in America. He wanted to see what else he could reach. What the public never saw was the man himself. In 1975, he met a Honolulu firefighter named Stan Cadwallader. For 38 years, they built a quiet life together in Hawaii, a macadamia farm on Maui, a private world his close friends protected without question. In 1994, hepatitis B destroyed his liver. Carol Burnett personally called UCLA's transplant chief to make sure her friend was saved. Then in January of 2013, at 82 years old, Jim Nabors finally married the man he loved. In a Seattle hotel room, days after it became legal, he died at home in Honolulu on November 30, 2017, at 87, with Stan beside him. America's simplest character was played by one of its most quietly complicated men, and he carried it all with total grace.
An old cow mule sitting on a mountain, sitting on a mountain, sitting on a mountain.
Frances Bevere was born on December 14, 1902, in a brownstone on Gramercy Park in New York City. She planned to be a teacher. Instead, she became a classically trained Broadway actress who entertained troops across Europe and the Pacific in World War II. Then, at 57, she took a role she would resent for the rest of her life. Because here's the truth nobody wanted to say out loud. America's sweetest aunt could not stand that set. Griffith loved pranks and singing between takes. Bevere was formal, serious, and openly offended by the horseplay. Ron Howard's own father said Andy seemed to carry a resentment toward her. By most accounts, Jim Nabors was the only cast member she truly warmed to. Years later, on the Mayberry RFD set, George Lindsay's crude language pushed her too far. She hit him over the head with her umbrella. Twice. And yet, she was magnificent. She won the Emmy in 1967 and appeared in 175 episodes. She logged 10 Mayberry years, longer than anyone else in the entire franchise. Then she did something extraordinary. In 1972, she retired to Siler City, North Carolina, a tiny real-life town. She was chasing the Mayberry life she'd spent a decade pretending to live. It broke her heart. The fan attention never stopped, and she withdrew completely. By the 80s, she rarely left the house, living alone with more than a dozen cats. Her Studebaker sat in the driveway on flat tires. In 1986, Andy Griffith and Ron Howard drove to her door unannounced. She spoke to them through the closed door and never opened it. She refused the reunion movie a third of America watched, and then, 4 months before her death, dying of cancer after a heart attack, she picked up the phone. She called Andy Griffith. She told him she was sorry they hadn't gotten along better. She said it was her fault. She died on December 6, 1989, at 86. Her headstone in Siler City says simply, Aunt B. In her will, the woman they called the most difficult person on that set left $100,000. It went in trust to the Siler City Police. Its interest still pays those officers a Christmas bonus every single December. Aunt B is still looking after Mayberry's lawmen. She never stopped.
Oh, now stop worrying. We'll clean it up with a mop and a pail and a bulldozer.
George Lindsay was born on December 17, 1928, in Fairfield, Alabama. He was raised by his grandparents in the small town of Jasper. He was a college quarterback and an Air Force man. And here's the twist. He was also a classically trained stage actor. He studied in New York and performed on Broadway. In 1962, he read for the role of Gomer Pyle and believed it was his. Then Andy Griffith saw Jim Nabors in that nightclub. When the first Gomer episode aired, Lindsay kicked in his own television screen. Then he joked that now he had nothing to watch Ben Casey on. 2 years later, the producers created Goober just for him. And Griffith handed him the 3 words that unlocked the whole performance: stop acting. Goober ended up appearing in more Mayberry episodes than Gomer ever did. Then he wore that beanie for 20 more years on Hee Haw. And according to Leonard Nimoy himself, Gene Roddenberry's first choice for Mr. Spock was George Lindsay. He turned it down. Goober Pyle nearly ran the Enterprise's science station. Off camera, he quietly raised over $1 million for the Alabama Special Olympics. George Lindsay died on May 6, 2012, at 83, exactly 2 months before Andy Griffith. Their last phone call, just days before the end, finished with both men saying, "I love you." His tombstone carries the only review he ever wanted. "I'm glad I made you laugh."
I don't care where they went, Goober. Did they bother anybody? They just ogled girls.
Howard McNear was born on January 27, 1905 in Los Angeles. Radio fans already knew his voice. He was the original Doc Adams on Gunsmoke for nearly a decade. He joined Mayberry in 1961 at age 56. His dreamy, fluttering Floyd became beloved fast. Don Knotts said the hardest part of his own job was not laughing in their scenes together. Then in 1963, mid-run, McNear suffered a massive stroke that paralyzed the entire left side of his body. He vanished from the show for over a year. According to the show's biographer, that comedy hole is a key reason Jim Nabors was brought in. Everyone assumed Floyd was gone forever. Then during a script session, someone said out loud how much they missed Howard. Andy called his house on the spot. His wife Helen told them work would be a godsend. What happened next is one of the kindest secrets in television history. McNear couldn't walk or stand on his own, so the crew built a hidden support stand that held him upright behind the barber chair. They filmed him seated on the bench, in close-ups, always from his good side. His paralyzed left hand was disguised under a newspaper. The stroke was never once mentioned on the air. For 3 more seasons, America laughed at Floyd the Barber. Nobody knew the whole production was quietly holding him up. By 1967, he could no longer remember his lines. Andy Griffith later called watching him struggle through his final scene the most painful experience of his life. Howard McNear died on January 3, 1969, at 63, just 8 months after the series ended. Mayberry's gentlest running joke was, in real life, its greatest act of loyalty.
Well, you're not a barber. You don't know about mixing lather and mug with a brush and everything. Oh, Club, that's such a nice sound.
Betty Lynn was born on August 29, 1926, in Kansas City, Missouri. And before she ever played Barney's sweetheart, she did something remarkable. At 18 years old, she toured the China-Burma-India Theater with the USO. She entertained wounded soldiers near the end of World War II. She became a Fox contract player. Cheaper by the dozen, June Bride with Bette Davis. And then Mayberry called. Here's the fact almost nobody knows. In 6 seasons as Thelma Lou, Betty Lynn never signed a contract. Not one. The producers just phoned when they needed her, at about $500 an episode, 26 episodes in all. When Don Knotts left, Thelma Lou's story ended with him. Her final episode reveals she married another man. It broke Barney's heart on national television. It took 20 years, but the 1986 reunion movie finally fixed it. Thelma Lou and Barney got married. Betty herself never married in real life. And then life imitated art completely. After her Los Angeles home was burglarized twice, she moved in 2007, at age 80. She chose Mount Airy, North Carolina, Andy Griffith's real hometown, the real Mayberry. She spent her final years signing autographs for fans at the Andy Griffith Museum, lines stretching out the door. She died there on October 16, 2021, at 95. Everyone else played Mayberry. Betty Lynn believed in it enough to actually move there.
Andy Taylor, Barney Fife, I'd like you to meet my husband, Gerald Whitfield.
How do you do? Hi.
Aneta Corsaut was born on November 3, 1933, in Hutchinson, Kansas. She studied under Lee Strasberg and made her film debut opposite Steve McQueen in The Blob. And yes, she and McQueen dated. In 1963, she was hired for exactly 1 episode as Opie's schoolteacher. The writers had given up on finding Andy a girlfriend, so they gave the throwaway character the least romantic name they could think of, Helen Crump. She stayed 6 seasons and married the sheriff. And according to Andy Griffith's biographer, the romance wasn't only on screen. He reports that Griffith and Corsaut carried on an affair through their years on the show. It was an open secret on that set. And Andy, though married, reportedly proposed to her more than once. She turned him down every time. She never married anyone, ever. But she never left his orbit either. Her final acting role, 30 years later, was as a judge on Matlock. Aneta Corsaut died of cancer on November 6, 1995, 3 days after her 62nd birthday. The sheriff married Helen Crump in Mayberry. In the real world, she said no, and somehow, they stayed close for the rest of her life.
Steve, tell us what happened. Well, I'm trying to tell you. Now, this thing had killed the doc. What was it?
Hal Smith was born on August 24, 1916, in Petoskey, Michigan. And here's Mayberry's best-kept joke. The town drunk didn't drink. Andy Griffith and Don Knotts both confirmed it. The man who let himself into that jail cell in 32 episodes was practically a teetotaler. Otis wasn't fired, by the way. The sponsors got nervous about drunkenness as comedy, and the character was quietly retired. Then Hal Smith became a voice you've heard your entire life without knowing it. He was Disney's official voice of Goofy for 16 years. He voiced Owl, and later Winnie the Pooh himself. He's the horse in Beauty and the Beast. In his final act, he brought Otis back for Mothers Against Drunk Driving commercials. The town drunk, sober, warning America. He died of a heart attack on January 28, 1994 at 77. He was at home, listening to a radio drama, the medium where he'd started 60 years before. Eleanor Donahue was born on April 19, 1937. She came to Mayberry straight from Father Knows Best as Andy's very first girlfriend, the town pharmacist. She had a 3-year contract. She asked to be let out after 1 season. She later said she felt like a bird out of a nest, not ready for adult roles. Years afterward, Griffith privately admitted part of the fault was theirs. They simply didn't know how to write for her. No firing, no feud. Just an honest mismatch, gracefully handled. Today in 2026, Eleanor Donahue is 89 years old, retired in the California desert. She's one of the very last living adults who ever walked the streets of Mayberry.
Andy, there's something I'd like to ask you about Jim.
What?
Well, he's been buying a lot of things and just charging them.
Well, there ain't nothing wrong with that.
A few more, quickly, because Mayberry ran deep. Howard Morris, the wild man Ernest T. Bass, appeared in only 5 episodes. 5. He was actually a sophisticated New York comic from Sid Caesar's writer's room who became a major TV director. He passed in 2005. Clint Howard is Ron's little brother, the toddler Leon, forever offering his peanut butter sandwich. Today he's 67 and still working, with over 250 credits. And here's Keith Thibodeau, who played Opie's pal Johnny Paul. He's the same man who played Little Ricky on I Love Lucy. Today, he's the last surviving regular cast member of that show. One man connects television's 2 founding families, and he's still with us. Ron Howard, Clint Howard, Eleanor Donahue, a handful of the kids. That's Mayberry now. Every September, thousands of people still pour into Mount Airy for Mayberry Days. Betty Lynn once laughed that the town's official Christmas tree was a maple strung with lights. She said if that wasn't Mayberry, she'd never seen it. Here's the truth this show leaves you with. Mayberry was never a real place. The people who built it were lonely, ill, underpaid, typecast, and heartbroken, and they showed up anyway. They held each other up behind barber chairs and hospital beds. And every week, they made us a promise that decency was possible. They kept it. Which of their stories hit you hardest? Tell me in the comments. And if this one moved you, watch The Waltons, cast Then and Now next. That family kept secrets too. Subscribe if you want more stories like this.